name is Judith Rauhofer. I'm a lecturer in information technology law at the University of Edinburgh Law School, and I'm here with Professor Andrea Matwyshyn from Northeastern University in Boston, where she is a professor of law and a co-director of the Center for Law, Innovation and Creativity. Andrea is our current MacCormick Fellow, and we are here to talk a little bit about her work and what she's doing and carrying out research on at the moment. So hello Andrea, and welcome to Edinburgh once again.
It's my pleasure to be here, despite a bit of rain.
A bit of rain, yes. Okay, so to start with, the first thing I was going to ask you is what work are you currently doing? What are you currently working on?
So all of my work relates to information technology and security policy in particular, as you mentioned. Right now, some of my sort of hot research areas include the questions around security of voting systems, but more generally, questions of corporate information security practices, artificial intelligence development, and the corporate governance and social governance questions that arise from those issues.
You have been involved and quite instrumental in getting through a new security research exemption in the American copyright system. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that? What happened there?
Sure. So the U.S. Copyright Office and the Librarian of Congress significantly nudged the policy of security research and securing voting systems forward in 2015 when they granted an exemption to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, an act which had previously prohibited or had been interpreted to prohibit security researchers, including academic researchers, from examining the way that voting systems functioned internally and the extent to which security vulnerabilities could have been used and can be used to manipulate the integrity of the code, potentially changing voter rolls, vote totals, etc. So in 2015, the Librarian of Congress granted this Digital Millennium Copyright Act exemption, and as a result, there has been a sort of renaissance of voting system research in the computer security community, culminating in multiple workshops at the DEF CON Security Conference recently, and there is a new report by the National Academies, which is sort of the definitive scientific body of the United States, offering a set of recommendations for securing our voting systems. And so this conversation has been partially reinvigorated because of the Copyright Office's forward-looking policy in recognizing that national security and voting concerns are implicated by copyright policy. And I was the attorney who represented a team of computer scientists and security researchers who requested the exemption. So I acted as not only law professor and requester, but also as counsel in that instance.
That's really great because, I mean, of course, the security of voting systems in the current climate is not something that we're all very, very concerned about from all areas. And in the UK particularly also, where we are talking currently about potentially the introduction of electronic voting systems, I'm sure that's probably going to be a very, very important body of research that we're going to be looking at as well. Now, your most recent work focuses a lot on things around the Internet of Bodies, as you have coined the term, and most recently also in the connection between that and artificial intelligence. In fact, you're going to give a guest lecture today about this today. Will you want to say a little bit more about that, about what you're looking at there?
Sure. So as the Internet of Things, in other words, the universe of consumer-oriented gadgets, devices that we have in our homes, but also things like hospital machines, robotic surgery devices, all of these machines that connect to the internet, they're now increasingly relating to the human body, whether it is a Fitbit exercise monitoring device that we attach to the exterior of our body, whether it is an implanted device such as a pacemaker or a cochlear implant, or it in the next generation will be some sort of digital vitamin, perhaps. We already have digital pills that have been approved for treatments, including cancer treatments. These kinds of next generation medical and recreational devices rely on code, computer code, for their functionality, which means that human bodies and the Internet of Things are merging, and that the safety, integrity, and availability of human bodies will increasingly rely on technology and computer code. And that raises a host of interesting and important legal and philosophical questions around the way that we create responsibility for building these devices in ways that consider the human attached to the device, what can possibly go wrong, what constitutes testing that passes the bar of safety, and how the feedback loops should be constructed to ensure that when one of these devices hurts a human that's attached to it, that there is product improvement and potentially legal consequence in the instance where the builder of the device did not exercise reasonable care in its creation. So that's the Internet of Bodies question. And then when we intersect that with the next generation of technology generally, in particular artificially intelligent systems, we will eventually inevitably arrive at a situation where the artificial pancreas that you rely on will have code that makes decisions for you and maybe adjusts in real time, which they do partially now, but the next generation will be an even more sophisticated set of algorithms in all of these devices that will be processing inputs in a way that potentially exceeds the speed of a human. And again, human safety will be impacted. Taking a national security example, so there are suits that are being developed for soldiers currently, which are exoskeletons, and they have a connection through the internet or through other systems to a main set of controlling machines. Now, these suits are intended to monitor the body temperature of the soldier inside and to provide feedback in order to help the soldier succeed in the designated mission. But what happens when a security vulnerability allows for the manipulation of those readings and the suit self-adjusts in a way that it believes to be in the best interest of the soldier, but in reality it could be a third party manipulating those readings, or it could be a malfunction in the suit. And so the more control that we take away from the human inside some of these systems, it does introduce additional risks. So the challenge is to build systems that both work swiftly and achieve goals, but also have the proper safeguards, including humans in the loop, to be able to ensure that in our desire to create shinier, more efficient technologies, that we don't end up counterproductively harming the humans that are reliant on those technologies.
And there is, of course, the information security issue. So, as you say, the vulnerability of the actual technology, but there is then also, as we have discussed before, the ongoing collection of information about the individual that can also then, and this, of course, in a way where our work intersects, where that information, that data can then be used to make decisions not just about the individual, but potentially about the collective group and all other kinds of things. So maybe that, to bring this to a conclusion, that sort of then nicely segs into yet another thing for the future I understand that you're interested in, which is this whole idea of how we are in the future are going to use this type of data. What we have discussed recently is social credit systems, and how more and more information is now going to be used to quantify the human, to make decisions about what humans can access, and so on and so on. It's happening in China, of course, we are seeing that, but it's happening in a more private sector basis. It's happening in other countries as well.
Yes, exactly. And so when we think about the potential of the current data collection, where our habits are monitored, our purchasing is monitored, our work histories, our likes, dislikes, social media activity, when that's all being rolled together into a data feed that is bundled and potentially purchased by future employers, by future banks, where decisions about our success and capabilities in society are made on the basis of this, those questions will only become even more complex when some of those data streams, for example, might be attached to devices that are attached to our bodies. So our bodies will begin to directly feed information, correctly or incorrectly monitored information, into these bundles of data that can be then used by third parties to make decisions about us. And so the potential inaccuracies of the readings that we see in algorithmically reliant products today, particularly when you intersect those questions with the Internet of Bodies questions that I mentioned, and you layer on the artificial intelligence questions, the application of that dynamic in a social credit context is particularly concerning on a whole host of levels, including the autonomy of the individual, dignitary interests, and really the accuracy of the information. If we look at the accuracy of most credit reports in the United States today, we see that there are often mistakes in those credit reports. And so while a consumer has an ability to identify and petition to correct those reports now, when those reports, if they begin to include this kind of algorithmically generated information from various sources, it will be progressively more difficult for an average consumer to even know how to contest the stream of information that made decisions about it because it purchased white asparagus, because the consumer purchased white asparagus instead of green asparagus at the grocery store.
Yes, and that of course has the capability of completely changing power relationships in a society between the different stakeholders, I imagine. And with that wonderful and beautifully painted picture of a dystopian future, I shall thank you for being here, and I hope we're going to continue working together on preventing said future. Thank you very much.
I look forward to it.